Hello again, everybody. I thought we'd have a look at some books. Now, these are a particular type of book. These are called annuals. If you grew up in this part of the world, the UK or Ireland, it was very common for comic books and magazines to issue something called an annual just before Christmas. And the idea was these become Christmas presents for kids. Now, what an annual was the magazine or comic book with stuff extra that didn't appear in the comic that year. They were always hardbound. They were usually A4, but these ones are a bit smaller. And the idea was that this was sort of a collectible thing that kept you happy over the Christmas, which they absolutely did, having been someone who got them as a kid. Now, these ones I never got as a kid because I didn't even know they really existed. I did read Model Railway Constructor magazine when I was a kid getting into the hobby, and it was a much better magazine, in my opinion, than Railway Modeler. It for the same reason I like magazines today, and I not too long ago reviewed the Airfix magazine, which became Model Trains International, the Chris Ellis magazine, in that they weren't just catalogs selling you stuff, and they weren't necessarily showing you expensive rich guys' layouts and collections, but they showed you how to build things. They had drawings, they had lots of things that a person on a or a kid on a modest income could do. If you were if you got a train set for your birthday or Christmas and you wanted to develop the hobby, magazines like Model Railway Constructor were the way to go. They they gave you the inspiration that other magazines gave you as well, but they also were showed you how to build things, create things, modify, kit bash things, which is still my favorite part of the hobby to this day. Now I have the Model Railway Constructor Annual from 1980. That's how thick they are. You see that the picture continues on to the back, and I have the 1982, which is a bit different on the back. And I mean, if I had got these when I was 15, 16, I would have been over the moon. But that this just been right up my street at that age, and it would have kept me happy for a long time, reading them and rereading them and looking at the photos. Uh, they're both these issues, both these annuals, were edited by S.W. Stephen Stratton, so I'm assuming he also did the 1981 too as well, which I don't have. Now the beauty of these was, again, the magazine was great, and it lasted until I think the late 1980s, and then went out of business sadly. And it was a shame really, because I've got some 60s, 1960s issue of this magazine, which we will look at, to show you how the hobby in the past was in many ways better than it is now. Nowadays, train magazines are just atrocious. They're all about spending money. They're little more than glorified catalogs. Where back then, they were more creative. They showed you how to build things and modify things and create things, and often for not a lot of money. So today we're going to look at the 1981, and in the next video we'll look at the 1982 one, or a later video. But today I want to concentrate on the 1981. So here it is. Show my hand to give you an idea of the scale, the size of it. And hardback cover, and there's a Great Western layout on the cover, very nice, always something very attractive. And these are sold in shops and magazine shops and everything, but I don't remember ever seeing the annuals in Irish shops. They didn't make them. Maybe they did, I just didn't see them. But we open them up and we get a picture of a large O gauge layout, O scale layout. There's the price, $3.25 at the time, €3. I picked this up somewhere over the years. So this is an O gauge layout. This would be aimed at more traditional modelers. But I found that O gauge layouts were very more inspiring in many ways for people in double O and HO, because I don't know why, there was something about them that they made tight curves and so on they hide them better. You see how the tight radius here is hidden by the engine shed? Like little tips like that were more likely to show up in O gauge, where space and confinement was more of an issue. And this is a scene from the Pontypool Riverside layout of the North Gwent Railway Modelers. The hand-built railway buildings are a standard Great Western Railway structure found in South Wales, and the track is bullhead rail soldered onto metal sleepers, or ties as the American called them. And this is the same layout, again from a different angle, looking this way, I think. Now you see how the compression in O gauge is really very useful for people working in smaller gauges. You see how they have the slight curve on the exit of the goods shed? So that gives you, a little bit more space through here. Again, very nice. Very, look how much has been compressed in this scene in O gauge. Imagine that in HO or double O. The photographs are always very well selected, I found. Same layout again, from a different angle. Again, look at all this action in a small section. We have a table of contents here. It was first published in 1979, so that was by Ian Allen Limited, who are well known for publishing train books and etc. And again, this would come out before Christmas, so so parents could get it, or partners could get it for someone to get it on Christmas Day. So here we go. How to construct an interesting building. Wadebridge Island Platform by Frank Cruddas. Now this is basically this interesting platform here, this island platform design building here. And you got this not only in these British magazines, but also in the German magazines of the period, and on the American ones, especially back in the 70s and 60s. And you get a description of the structure, the size, the relationship to the railway, the station itself, and you get drawings, and you get the person who built it. So you get this in your the corrugations on the roof, how that with corrugated tin was done, quite how the valance was done. That would have been really tricky, but there were ways of doing that. And the idea was to just give you, there you go, the inspiration to build this rather than to buy it, to develop your skills, to build up your toolkits, to develop your confidence. And also, if you couldn't build this, maybe find a way to kit bash something similar, or a freelance version. And there it is in the background with a steam train in the foreground from 1959. Kelston Road. The mastheads are very basic and simple. They're almost like government training manuals. But it was probably from a generation that grew up in World War II and were used to this kind of thing. A 16.5 gauge 4mm scale layout. That's double O gauge. So it's double O gauge trains running on HO track basically. And this is a terminus layout. Here's the plan. Just by even looking at these things, you get ideas, like you understand where a signal box should be there. There's double switch. It's like the schematics are very useful. A general view of the complete scenic portion of the layout. Two main lines, both headed by Class A1 Pacifics, are about to pass each other, and a Class L1264 tank loco in the bay platform on this side. Very nice ballasting there. See, this is HO, so it looks like it's been hand-laid track. It's definitely not proprietary, I don't think. It looks like it's almost like a low-profile, a Code 100 version of Triang's Super 4 track. Again, some more photos of the layout. This is what I liked about this magazine. They always had low-down photographs looking into the rolling stock. When I found that a lot of railway modelers' photographs, and that was the big magazine in this part of the world, the camera was always overhead looking down. I used to find these, and just all the layouts they would feature and everything. I always prefer this view as well, like to give you an idea. Now, I think the reason they probably went, I read this article years ago, I don't remember. They may have went with the 16.5 millimeter HO gauge track so they could use mechanisms from HO underneath the layouts. So they could have a better, instead of having to rebuild EM gauge, which is the correct for HO distance, I think it's 921 millimeters and 19 millimeters. And these kinds of photographs when you were a kid were like very inspiring. You know, nowadays we can make videos of this with GoPro cameras, but this was unless you had a really good camera back then, this was a very difficult shot to take. Yeah, I think it's Code 100 rail laid on correctly spaced British sleepers. And there's the control panel using the triang passing contact switches. Very clever design. Well, I mean, there's very similar designs and everything else, but there's a common ground, and if the passing contact switch is supposed to mimic the handles in a real life signal box, so there's a kind of an action element to that kind of modeling as well. Abbey Village, a HO9 scenic layout. Now this is first color photographs we see, and it's great. This would have been the kind of thing that would have really appealed to me. And if you see my layout, this is the kind of thing I like. Trains running through like kind of diverse, interesting scenery with lots of little things going on. I love wooden buildings. This would have been a HO scale, the figures, a 9 millimeter narrow gauge, so you could be N gauge track basically running through 3.5 millimeter HO scale environment. And I just love this. You see, this is an incredibly real. It's not particularly realistic, right? It's not particularly. It's got an element of fantasy about it, but it's loaded with charm. And I love that. I saw a layout that was based in modern day Miami recently on a magazine, in one of the American magazines, and it was cold, dead, and soulless. It was like, why would you want to why would you want to model a Walmart or a? I mean, I know it just was just all. It just seemed cold. Where these people who want perfect modern might laugh at this, but yet that's full of charm. This is what brings people to the hobby, are these kinds of layouts. They're the ones you notice at exhibition. Yet the trees are not perfect. They're kind of like, standard model trees. That's a lovely kind of half timbered house there. I really love that. Again, that's scratch built. You can tell just by looking at it. Bits of cardboard and balsa, bits of strip wood, and look, the lichen tree is not very popular these days, but they do the job. They do the business, And here's the 009 stock, and part of the village with the locomotive James with a typical train, like a mixed train on 009. I mean, again, charm, beauty, art. The artistic element is very powerful in these layouts from the past. That's often sadly missing the layouts of the day. Well, the ones that get publicized in the mass media anyway. And let's look at this. This is a horizontal. Now, this would be the kind of thing that would have just made me just want to start building something right away as a kid. A thatch roof cottage with a fence around it. A little pub in the background, it's also attached. A canal, barge on a canal, coming out of a tunnel out of a mountain or a large hill. I mean, that to me, I would look at that when I was like, 12, 13, and I would have said, that's what I want to build. And I could go home and I could cut up a cardboard cereal box or food carton and find a way to make that cottage, to make those buildings, to make that barge from scrap. And that will always be the primary driver in this hobby for me. And there's an incline railway here. They were quite popular for a while back in the day, but not now. A funicular. I mean, to me, that's just heaven in modeling. And then there's some nice black and white shots of the same scenes. I mean, look at this. It's like, you see, it's almost like a Hobbit. It's almost like the Shire in model train form. Wonderful. And there's the track plan. Another view of the pub. And there you go. It's a two-level. Looks like it's a two-level plan. A list of the locomotives: a Lilliput, a Roco, a Juf, and then converted Minitrix and Arnold N-gauge, N-scale models. And another view of the thing. Now, I would have just pored over this article over and over again. Westport Harbour, a photo feature of 7mm scale by S. Sutcliffe. And this is a marine harbour thing, possibly. It looks like it's Scottish. Yeah, it's crude third rail. Again, why not? You know, you learn about things. You learn about other scales. Again, because it's O scale, and is it O scale? Yeah, 7mm scales. Oh, it's O gauge. It learns you learn from these how to compress a lot into a small space if you're working on HO or double O. Now these are obviously scratch built Pullman coaches. That's something you could do yourself, you know, very easily, or convert something in your own scale. Like you saw the one that I've done on another video where I converted I think it was a Triang Pullman into an Irish Pullman. It's the easiest thing in the world. Some more of the rolling stock. Again, I would find these images when I was younger more interesting than inspiring. A Great Northern 8-ton van. How to build a van. Not how to save up, not to get your credit card out and buy it. Not to, you know, wait, just to build it. And there, any materials you want. You get yourself a small underframe with the wheels and whatever scale you're working in, and then construct this in plastic cardboard. I mean, some of the best models I've seen have been built on literally from cardboard from cereal packets, and then you get something like this. You can fabricate all these things, like you can fabricate these hose pipes here from guitar strings. You see with the wounding on them. And tips on how to build them. This I used to find this stuff very useful. You know, tips on how to actually develop the curve along a roof. And I used to use things like shampoo bottles, things like that, plastic shampoo bottles. Especially when super glues and crazy glues became more popular when I was growing up, it made gluing these a lot easier. How to construct a 7mm narrow gauge model. And it's a British steamer here. And this will be for more advanced modelers, building a metal chassis using the Triang motor there. And there are the parts in 7mm O gauge. And they're a straightforward template. And if you want to make it in a smaller gauge, half it, whatever the percentage down is. But even if you didn't build this, you learn things like, oh, well, I could build all the back end of the cab in one piece and then bend these round, and you know, things like that you probably would have never known about if you didn't do like metalwork in school. And there's a more detailed schematic drawing of the finished thing. Thin paper insulations, you know, this kind of thing. Woodlands, a photo feature of a 4mm scale layout owned by Alan Kirk of Sheffield. Photos by Brian Monaghan. And you know, this would be like if you start out with a train set, this is what you could have one day. This is what you can have one day if you got the room. That's beautiful, lads. There's something about curved platforms. There's something about the curved platform. I don't know what it is. And also the curve leading into a tunnel. I have this on my own layout. There's an unusual oversized load being hauled on a special Great Western wagon. the Hornby Teak coaches. There's a horse and a wagon, a Clydesdale or a Shire horse as they're called, the obelisk in the town, this tram, market hall, all this would be all scratch built from card and plastic. Nothing would be proprietary other than the people. That's in. I'm just this one. This caught my eye. It's a very a model of a BR utility logo, a more unusual model for most layouts. I'm not sure what that means. Utility logo. It looks like it used a Continental HO driving system, and this looks almost like the motor is under here. I'll have to look that one up. Again, you learn something. You go on a knowledge quest. Back then, when you hadn't got the internet, you had to go ask around and ask people, and hope you'd find out one day. Lovely built the Dolphin Hotel. I love that. That's a beautiful building there with the old carriageway into it. You see this in the bottom there, and these kind of bay features. It's all cardboard and paper. A London, I'm not sure what that is. London, Brighton and South Coast Railway, class 060 goods logo. Now this would be one you could probably put together using the triang mechanism, the one that's used on the Ginty or on the 080 diesel shunter, and you build a new body around it. So this would be, quite doable. Not for a for someone who is starting to go into the world of kit bashing, that would be one you could probably use that to modify it around it. A 20-ton brake van. Now remember, this might not have been available in certain scales at the time. Again, it gives it to you in a larger scale, but you just shrink it down to what you need. It gives you the feet, 27 feet. So that's, basic math. You can work that down. I always thought these British style brake vans with the kind of the gap, this whatever you call this on the end, the flat car ends. Very interesting looking vans. I think I have a couple of models of these. I know I do. A Taffrail 10-ton high mineral wagon. So you can spend the year building this on a Hornby chassis or a Triang chassis or a Mainline chassis. Mainline made fantastic models. When Mainline came out around the same time, 1980, and they were a revelation. They were superb models that anyone could buy. A Great Eastern Railway 10-ton open wagon. A Northeastern 8-ton dropside wagon. And we're getting a whole bunch of wagons here you can model that aren't available by manufacturers. A large 4mm scale station building. Okay, this is the kind of thing you dream of having one day, having the ability to build it. South Shields, that's around Newcastle area in England, I think. The club. Look at that. That's would be just wood and cardboard with brick paper on it. A huge mainline station. Look at that. So yeah, I mean, you might look at that and say, I can't build the whole thing, but I could build a freelance station built on this section here. You'd say, how hard is this if they can build that? Maybe I can build this. Character. See that? So sadly lacking in everything today, not just models. Character. Good foundations are important. The construction of reliable baseboard. So you see, you got your model train layout, and you want to build a permanent baseboard, and this shows you how to do it using plywood, and it looks like 2x1s. That's all right. I've got 2x1s, and I've got a very similar system holding up my layout. And there's how to do the joints. Standard mortise and tenon joint. It's still in inches. We haven't gone metric yet. Interesting that. Like, this is like 10 years after metric in England, and they were still using inches. Old habits die hard. And again, how to do the joints, how to, whatever your requirements are, how to build a thing. So if you're a kid and your dad was handy with woodwork, which many dads were back then, you could sit down and build this. But now we've got an image of a continental layout, but it has no, it looks like it's N gauge. And this is a Swiss, German, I think. Now look at that again. Charm, the log cabin, this wonderful viaduct. This would be bang where I would jump right to. And again, the 10 scale N gauge. I used to be amazed by these locos when I was a kid, that you get all that coupling rod detail and everything in N gauge. The Laufenmühl and Spitzberg Railway, a freelance continental layout in N gauge. Talks about the baseboard, positioning the track work. Again, there's something about hilly and mountain scenery I'll take any day over flat. These kind of trees, we look at these now and say, well, they're not very realistic. But, do you want something beautiful that gives pleasure to the eye, that's aesthetically pleasing? Or do you want, like, as you see in more and more modern layouts, a plastic Walmart or McDonald's in the background? To me, there should be an element of escape. Like when I was a kid and I got my first German or French trains, I tried to, like, it was almost like an escapism out of where I grew up into. Like, I'm in France, I'm in America. There's an escapism into these. They're almost like they're more than just a layout. You might live somewhere that's not any part of the world like this, but you can escape into it through your modeling. You broaden your mind, you learn about other cultures. That's a lovely, I've seen that kit before. That's quite adaptable to a lot of, there's a HO version of this as well. Helgen. That's, a Helgen kit. That's quite adaptable to a lot of North American as well, with a bit of scratch building. And there's the layout, quite complex. It shows just how much track you can squeeze into a HO size space for N gauge. So like, if this is 8x4, whatever, look how much N gauge track you can squeeze in. If you're into that. I don't really particularly, I'm not a huge fan of masses and masses of track. And there's a nice goods shed scene, very useful for any modeler, just about anywhere in the world. A little goods shed there. The depot. It's a place to put a fence, backdrop, maybe a truck or some cars doing deliveries. And this is the building of that scenery on the same layout. So they've given the layout of the construction article, but they're given a second article on building the scenery. And we have it all here. Look at that's a great scene. The engine shed here, and the branch line or the main line going off into a tunnel. This is a technique you see in a lot of European layouts, where if you have a corner, and let me see if I can draw it for you. So here's the baseboard, right? Here's the corner. Now you've got to run your track around here. So you can either build a tunnel here to hide this on the back part, but on the front part, why not take advantage of it? So you run a siding here to a small industry. So suddenly this is not a dead corner. It's it's a corner that's, useful. If you have a double track line, it's going to be even better because you can have a crossover here, and or even extend this one through here and have a very interesting for operational. But you're making use of the corner. It's not just a dead corner or somewhere you can stick a farmhouse. You have like an industry and some sidings to serve it. And especially it looks really good, like on that picture. If you put a tunnel here, mouth here to hide this, and your operational view is from here. This is your parade route, as the Germans call it on layouts, and it just looks really good. It's just so interesting, and you can see it here. Look at that, the compression. Yet there's still a sense of distance. You see, there's compression, but it's still a sense of this is going off somewhere else. The trees, and in this case, he's put an engine shed here, but you could in this corner, but you could also put an industry. I'd be more inclined to do that. Some typical. I've never been a fan of this kind of alpine scenery. I've never been really into these kind of houses. I know it's a huge thing, and there's lots of them, lots of kits out there, and lots of layouts. I've never, and even haven't been to Switzerland myself and southern Germany. I've never really liked that kind of. It's never appealed to me. This. I mean, that scene would look better with probably a few farm buildings rather than. They're just not my taste. Those Swiss chalet type houses. There's the electric logo going over the bridge. Again, depth, scene, charm. Diversion at Canford to Ulverston, an interesting prototype station. And okay, this is Ulverston Station in England. I'm sure it still exists. Quite a complex track layout in its day. Interesting, the tower. It reminds me of the tower in Birkenhead for the underground railway that you go over to Liverpool when you get the ferry over. Very nice. Again, photos for inspiration. Love this nighttime scene here. Look at that. Hand-built models by the late Edward Exley. So the man passed away and he built these models in O. They look like they're all O, and they're stunning. They just show you what, a nice, almost like obituary of a great modeler. I've always kind of liked this thing. He was obviously a professional builder. What is that, like Egyptian or something? Yes, an Egyptian State Railways diesel. That's something you would normally never see. This is, look at that, it's incredible. French steam from the modeler. Yeah, this is an interesting. Around the 1980s, early 80s, French models were very available through GUF, and Hornby Acho, and surprisingly inexpensive. And they were kind of like, I never understood how Hornby Acho made better quality models, even though it's the same company generally, for France than they did for Britain. But anyway, so you know me, I've spoken about how much I love French steam locomotives. They're just something about them. And this is all about the different classes and different types. There's just something about the French models. A GUF model of a coal burning Type 141 ore. That's stunning. That these smoke deflectors, there's something, even the way they create the smoke deflectors, there's something stylish about them. And a GUF model of an SNCF class 30A tender type here. Even their tenders are cool looking. GUF made wonderful models. By today's standards, maybe the drive system wouldn't be good, but in terms of the actual build, there was nothing wrong with their models. And here's a French one with a condensing tender. Now there's an idea. I recently got this you might have seen that I got this condensing tender, this German condensing tender, in a lot that I'd bought. So they were used in France as well. I've seen on the Clutch and Merrill HO layout of Nick Woods. The logo in the foreground is an XPLM Pacific class 2G something which is preparing to take on water. This model is the same simple conversion of your model. In the back, that's this one. In the background, a condensing 210 of the Type 150R, which is a Pico model of a German type. In actual fact, 1993 was working in the northeast of France as a war repatriation. So that's how the German condensing tender and loco ended up in France. Coaling up, a photo feature illustrating some of the many types of coaling facilities seen on a model layout. I mean, this is great inspiration. Look at this, a ramshackle. It's like something you'd see on the old American layouts, which I love and are fantastic. Again, full of charm. The corrugated sheeting practically blown off by wind and the weathering. Look at, you could fit that. There's just something amazing about this. Is a more kind of a wooden type with an overhang. I love that. I might have a go at that myself. You could make back then the corrugations with sheets of aluminium by running a comb across it, and then to give you the ridges, and then gently gluing it on without flattening them. It's a much more complex one, the type where the train comes up the ramp and puts the coal into these, whatever they're called, funnels. And there's a lovely American one, the simplicity of it. Look, it's a coaling tower slash watering station. I love this. So I love the old time American stuff. Some great photographs here. I mean, there's just mountains of inspiration in this. Look at this. Just mountains of inspiration. Like, forget the coaling tower. Just look at the rest of it. And all in different gauges and scales, which is great. And the final back leaf is a 7mm model of a Sterling single on a special train of the York O gauge group. And that's it. Model Railway Constructor, annual 1980. And we'll look at the 1982 another time. But it just, it was a great time to be a kid growing up and into this hobby back then. Because it wasn't necessarily about spending money. You dreamed about having these things. You looked at the catalogs and, but I think so many of us as kids said, I'm going to try and build that out of cardboard, and I don't care if it's crap. I'm going to do it. And a lot of scratch built stuff I've done over the years have been not very good. Well, it doesn't matter. It's good enough for me, and it's, the old adage of your railway, your rules. So well done, Elon Publications and Model Railway Constructor, for really, producing something that really, gave modelers something, to really work with. We'll have a quick look at the 1980. We'll try and bring the video up to an hour of the 1982 one. And I won't cause much detail in this, but we'll just look through it. This is a double O gauge layout. You see a similar thing to what I was saying. The track goes off into the distance, and on the corner of the baseboard we have another engine set. The double O layout, very nice. The contents page. A Great Northern British steam locomotive you can build, a tender locomotive. Tips on how you might want to build it if you're at that level. And there's the model running, and there's, look at that, it's almost like an American coach. And the prototype. Bridges. Just basically photographs of bridges, viaducts, just to give you inspiration. Not a lot to be said, just look at this trestle, American trestle, wow. And there's a British trestle. I bet you didn't know American modelers didn't know this. We had trestle bridges in these parts of the world. An LMS Streamline Pacific, beautiful. Just telling you what they are: lattice girder bridge, plate girder bridge, plate bridge, viaduct, a simple bridge for a 009. That's a great panoramic scene. That looking into that. Scenic development of a simple O-gauge layout. How the scenes were developed, how those scenes were delivered, the buildings they built. The trees always was a big thing with me with kids. Like, how do we get really good trees? And it's not easy. It wasn't easy building trees. You know, everyone had their own techniques, but like, you know, that was the beauty of it. The Patty's Hall Quarry Railway, another freelance narrow gauge system. The map where it might have existed in real life. The models, very nice. Railway construction requirements. Full-size dimensions reduced for the modeler. And that's a very useful thing for scratch builders, because it show. Oh, here we go. It's basically the British standard gauge clearances for platform height, tunnel entrances, width of the permanent way, the loading gauge, and actual size in millimeters. That is just. This is such a useful thing. The annual alone would have been worth this to so many people modeling. Equivalent height in 7mm scale, O, 4mm scale, N, HO, not double O, and N scale. And you can split the difference for HO if you're modeling in HO. That is so useful. That is so useful, those kinds of things. And a brief survey for a modeler of what locomotives, standard British Rail locomotives are available. The time period they were used. This would be the final years, I guess. We've got a few of these. By different makers. These are the prototypes now, not the models. Very useful when you go into the custom detail and things like that. The 9F, I've got the Hornby Golden series or Silver series of this. Years ago I got it, and I weathered the wheels because they were really shiny, and the running gear. I love this model. I just love this old Hornby version of it. It looks great going around the layout with a rake of Pullman coaches. These were actually a freight locomotive that were so versatile that they ended up pulling express passenger trains. And they're incredibly powerful and fast. They were the last ever steam locomotive, I believe, built in Britain. And they were just phenomenal engines. An American HO system in Great Britain. So here we go, an American, looks like a Pacific Northwest type system. Here's the track plan. That's quite a large layout. Yeah, the Burlington route. So Pacific Northwest towards Chicago. The Alco switcher there. It's a nice looking layout. I love the transmission tower with the electrical transformer. See, these are things that are not difficult to model, but they add so much visual quality. And there's pictures of the layout from overhead in black and white. And here's a color one. I have to say the color reproduction on the photograph is not the best. It might have faded over the years. Central of New Jersey boxcar there. A Reading boxcar. And a Rio Grande boxcar, Denver and Rio Grande boxcar, a wooden one. And there's the passenger depot. That looks like the Atlas model, the Atlas, which is a great model actually. They're out of production now. That was a plastic kit that had loads of potential. I was always very impressed with the roof. the slates or tiles, or whatever they call them in America. They were very rough and random. For a plastic kit, they were very realistic. And there's an E unit, I think. Yeah, it's an E unit or an F unit. Like bringing in a passenger, the school bus. Always have the details ready. Yeah, it's an E unit with a baggage car, and so it's like the latter days of American passenger trains, 1960s. Just basically one coach, one passenger car, one loco. Although it would be rare, you often have, because of reliability issues, you'd often have two of these. So you'd have two of these to run around without having to use a turntable. But you'd have two gigantic. This looks like an E7, I think, or an E4. Two gigantic General Motors passenger units pulling a single coach and a baggage car. But again, very, very useful. You see, people would be wanting to be interested in American modeling, and they say, "Oh well, American trains are gigantic. We've seen all the Hollywood movies where there's a car chase, and the guy gets away because he leaves the cops on the other side of the level crossing, or the grade crossings as they call them there." And you say, "Oh, I need tons of room to model American railways." No, in the 60s and 70s, well, especially in the 60s, you could run passenger trains that might only have a baggage car and one passenger car. Very, very doable. Very doable. Again, there's something about the romance of American model trains. It's just part. There we go again. We have more traditional type heavyweight coaches, cars, passenger cars, baggage, passenger car, E logo, an E7, sorry, an E7, a model power model in that silver Burlington route scheme. Introducing, at the time, KD couplers would not have been well known in Britain, this part of the world. So this was to introduce people to like the wonders of the KD coupler. Great coaling tower, look at that. So this transitional steam to diesel era in America lasted a long time. So you had you had plenty of what were then modern diesels with older, and sometimes not at all, probably built in the 40s, steam locos. More plans, 7mm wagon, a mail van, Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway, I think that would be, yeah, Illinois. A Great Eastern Railway coach, almost looks American with the balcony thing on the end there. And in tunnels, we had a section on inspiring bridges and viaducts. Now we have one on tunnels. These multiple single portal tunnels, I always think look really impressive. Yeah, look at that. There's something very impressive about single portal tunnels when they're staggered like that, as opposed to a double one or something else. An incline railway for pulling wagons up to your mine and bringing them down to your trains. How the electric circuit that can be used to, when it gets to the top, it switches over and puts the incline back down, so it's an automatic thing. The Juke Dog project, the model was before restoration. Look at this. This is something you see a lot now on YouTube, where someone has a model, an old kit that's broken and needs fixing up. Now this is fairly common because no wheels on the tender. It looks like a sorry sight, and this is what he restored it to. Now this was long before you had YouTube or people showing you how to fix up old models. This is what I loved at magazines like Model Railway Constructor. Instead of running out to buy something, or you find an old second-hand thing up, here's how to fix it. It looks like he rebuilt the chassis and everything. He did a beautiful job on this. Wow. Raymond Kirby, Interesting name. Sounds like a character from an old British movie. Ramon Kirby. Special trains. Oh, that's a Donegal rail car. Yeah, this is an Irish. So here's an Irish narrow gauge layout in what scale? Can't tell. It looks like it's O. But yeah, this is the County Donegal Railway. So here's your Irish layout. 3-foot gauge track. The famous County Donegal rail cars, mixed trains. There's still a few of them not far from here in Donegal town preserved. And some of the coaches, not the rail cars, they're on the Isle of Man now. But there's one of them in Ireland, the Fintown Railway in Donegal. And here's the map of the Donegal Railway from Ballyshannon to Derry with a branch to Killybegs. The Killybegs, when you go to Killybegs today, you can still see the tracks, the 3-foot tracks on the docks from where they used to load and unload the fishing boats. The County Donegal closed in 1960. It was really destroyed by the border. Northern Ireland was here and the Republic of Ireland was here. The border was built across here, just west of Strabane. And it destroyed. There was all kinds of things like tax and customs implications, and there was no way like the government from either side was going to put any funding into it. Although if it had all been in the Republic, it probably would, because the West Clare Narrow Gauge Railway under CIA did receive significant investment by the Irish government to keep it going. They destroyed the railways in Ulster, sadly. Not that this was an amazing rail line or anything like that. It was open today. It'd probably definitely be a scenic thing, and parts of it are open. Like the Finn Valley part here is still open. And there's a picture of where's the yard. Stranraer. That was some railway town when it's back in its day. A large narrow gauge and a large standard gauge interchange yard station. All gone now. Nothing left. Nothing left. It's amazing. If there's one place in the world that was decimated of its railways, it was West Ulster. Church Fenton, another station project you can build. There's the track layout. Some buildings, photographs, not the best reproduction. They're a bit too dark. That's actually pretty poor for getting into a publication. Same here, you see that they're just too dark. Then again, they didn't have desktop publishing back then. It wasn't as easy to adjust the contrast and tonal features of photographs. More on bridges, part 2. So these like low-lying trestle bridge, a huge wide arch bridge. I love them. A major bridge going over a harbour. Paddle steamer in the bay. This is beautiful, this German one here again, full of charm and detail. Stone double track bridge, double span bridge. Very substantial structure, but you see them all over Germany, very common. Huge viaduct. There's just something about a viaduct. Very hard thing to model. You think it would be easy, but it's not. If you don't have a kit, to build something like this takes a lot of work. Look at this, it's almost like a Roman viaduct where the arches are stacked upon each other rather than single tall arches. That is a beautiful scene. The steam rail car set going over in the background the viaduct, the foreground the single span bridge and the rough river on the bottom. That is a with the it must have been taken outdoors because it looks so good. But that'd be the kind of picture you'd look at and say, how do I model that? How do I do this? How do I make that? And then a H09 continental layout, narrow gauge European layout. Again, full of charm. Photos are out of focus, a bit weird. Full of charm, just beautiful. Just to get you thinking about doing the hobby a different way. You might have an N-gauge set and you don't like N-gauge anymore. You could use the chassis take the bodies off and convert the chassis to HO9 or 009. Again, you're in that part of the world when you model it. This kind of Art Nouveau Baroque architecture. Cold Comfort, a 4mm layout by Tony Osborne. Now look what he's packed into that scene. Wow. This is just amazing. Like that, what he's put into that in 00 4mm scale. There's the layout. It doesn't look that substantial, but he's just, track work isn't that substantial, but it's because he's packed it out with details. It's just a great, you know, when you see these photographs of these kind of layouts, you just fall into the details. You just fall into them. Every little few inches is it gives you ideas. It's inspirational. Look at that, just packed. I love this. Look at this. This to me is like the perfect model train scene. Little passenger station, the steam loco, the coaches in the foreground. Looks like a coaling or a water tower. A cottage in the background, some trees. That is, it's just bang. That there's an intensity there that you want. This is what made me fall in love with the hobby. Photos like this, or seeing layouts like this. A good way to hide a curve. Put a building rather than a tunnel entrance, and disappears behind a building. That way you can have a lower level hill behind it. It's great stuff. I think that's the Airfix footbridge. Wonderful. He's mixed European. That's a Kibri water tower. I have that. Coal mine. Just in this one scene, so much bang for your buck. You know, so much bang for your buck. Going around the corner into the tunnel. He's curved. He hasn't built anything in the baseboard here. And this is Dunnock Edge Goodshed. So there you have it. So that was a trip down memory lane nearly 50 years ago to the models, the magazines that I had as a kid, the annuals, and the modeling world of back then. And yeah, it's nostalgic, yeah, it's the past, but this is why we have the hobby. It doesn't matter if you're in North America, Europe, this part of the world. This is why we have it's at some point along the line you were inspired. I saw a question on social media today where someone said, and it was in America, of course. I'm not, don't take it the wrong way. I'm starting to build a layout. What's the code track that I should use? Obviously, it's code 100. I know modelers who are experienced modelers who've actually switched from code 83 down to code 100 just because it's stress-free running. And then somebody barges in and saying, well, you need to have code 83 for your main lines and code 70 whatever for your sidings and industries. And I was like, you just that's not that you didn't answer that question. You basically threw the person in there at the most difficult end. And most people said code 100, code 100, code 100. So it illustrates the difference. Do you want perfection or something that works properly? And that's what this world was all about. Code 100 track. Make it yourself and stress-free running. Okay, I'll see you next time.